Every time Tesla spoke about spirit, he wasn't pointing upward. He was pointing inward, into the circuitry running through your own body. The shock comes when you realize this. What people call God's spirit behaves less like a distant divine mist and more like a live electrical current that answers only one thing: the configuration of your internal circuit. Not belief, not ritual. Configuration. I learned this the hard way. Every moment you feel a surge of intuition, an impossible coincidence, a sudden clarity that slices through noise, you're not being guided by something external. You're witnessing your internal wiring finally align with a universal field that's been firing signals at you nonstop. Most people never register it because their circuit is fragmented. Reverse charge here, overloaded line there, broken loop in the emotional core that keeps short-circuiting their direction. They pray for signs while ignoring the panel that actually receives them. Tesla hinted at this every time he obsessed over resonance. He wasn't trying to mystify the universe, he was decoding its mechanics. He knew that a circuit doesn't receive what it wants, it receives what it's tuned to. And when your internal circuitry is scrambled by suppressed emotion, scattered attention, or unresolved electrical charge, the spirit you think is silent is actually broadcasting at full power. You're just not wired to hear it. Here's the real twist no one names out loud. The so-called divine isn't testing you, it's reflecting you. It's a mirror made of frequency. And the moment you shift the structure of your internal current, the entire field around you reorganizes as if it was waiting, because it was. When you look at your life through the lens of a circuit, something becomes obvious. Most people aren't blocked. They're wired in a way that guarantees interference. The hidden mechanism Tesla kept hinting at is simple but uncomfortable. Your thoughts aren't the primary signal. Your charge pattern is. Thought is just the surface voltage. The real command is buried in the deeper current running through your nervous system. That current is ancient, fast, and brutally honest. It doesn't negotiate. It reports exactly what you are broadcasting internally, even when you're unaware of it. Here's the part people miss. Every emotional state carries a specific electrical density. Fear tightens the circuit, making the current jagged and inconsistent. Shame collapses entire pathways, creating dead zones where no signal can stabilize. And longing, the quiet hunger for something you don't believe you can have, creates a loop that constantly folds energy back into itself, like a wire that never quite completes the circuit. This is why you feel stuck even when you're trying hard. You're feeding power into a configuration that can't deliver output. Tesla's obsession with resonance wasn't spiritual poetry. It was a manual for how the internal circuit synchronizes with the external field. When two frequencies match, they exchange information effortlessly. But when the internal circuit is irregular, the field around you has nothing to lock onto, so opportunities slide past, intuition arrives scrambled, and you live in delay. Not because reality is withholding anything, but because your wiring can't stabilize the incoming data long enough for you to act on it. There's a deeper mechanic underneath all this. The body constantly reads microsignals from your environment and decides which ones you're capable of receiving. This isn't mystical, it's regulation. Your system is scanning for resonance compatibility. If you're emotionally overloaded, the scanner downgrades sensitivity to protect you, which means the very signals you want, direction, clarity, timing, get filtered out before you can even feel them. You think nothing is happening, but in truth, everything is happening and your circuit can't carry the load. And this leads to the question most people never dare to ask, the one that burns once you understand the mechanics. What happens when the circuit finally stabilizes? Most people cling to the myth that clarity comes from thinking harder, praying louder, or waiting for the right moment. But that belief collapses the moment you examine how a circuit actually behaves. A circuit doesn't wait. It completes, or it doesn't. The myth is that guidance comes from outside, some distant intelligence deciding when you're ready. But the real mechanic is brutal in its simplicity. You only register a signal when your internal wiring can hold it without burning out. That's why moments of insight feel sudden. Not because they arrived randomly, but because your circuit finally stopped leaking long enough for the field to lock in. Think of the times you were exhausted after an argument. Not emotionally tired, but electrically drained, like your whole system sagged. That's not psychological fatigue. That's a temporary short circuit. The emotional surge overloaded your wiring, and now the current that normally carries intuition, creativity, and direction can't stabilize. You open your phone, scroll, pace, try to think your way out of the fog, but nothing sharp comes through. The signal didn't disappear. Your capacity to conduct it did. And here's the twist that destroys another comforting myth. You don't regain clarity by withdrawing or shutting down. You regain it by completing the internal loop that the conflict disrupted. Every emotional spike leaves residual charge in the circuit, unprocessed voltage that keeps bouncing around. If you don't discharge or redirect it, it becomes noise. Noise becomes distortion, and distortion becomes the invisible force guiding your choices without you realizing it. Suddenly you're reacting instead of deciding, compensating instead of creating. Take that argument scenario again. You walk away, heart pounding, mind replaying every line. You think you're overthinking, but what's really happening is that your system is trying to reroute the leftover electrical surge. It wants completion. It wants a stable loop. And until that happens, the field around you keeps reflecting back the same chaotic frequency. Conversations feel tense, tasks feel heavier, timing feels off. Not because the world shifted, but because your circuit is still carrying yesterday's charge. And the moment you finally realize what that charge is doing to your entire signal, one question hits you with the force of a voltage spike. How much of your life is being shaped by energy you never resolved? When the nervous system is overloaded, people mistake the collapse for weakness, but I see it for what it is. A signal regulator tripping its own breaker to keep the entire circuit from frying. Calm isn't some spiritual virtue. It's electrical coherence. It's the moment the internal current stops scattering across too many pathways and finally chooses a single route. And the instant that happens, what you call clarity returns. Not as a thought, but as a stabilized signal your body can finally translate. Your nervous system is the only place where spirit, as Tesla used the word, becomes operational. If the system is jittered, compressed, or overstimulated, the incoming field information has nowhere consistent to land. You've felt this 1,000 times. You sit down to make a choice and your chest tightens, your thoughts jump, your breath gets shallow. That's not indecision. That's electrical turbulence. The system is trying to regulate current that's too sharp or too scattered to carry cleanly. And until you stabilize the regulator, no amount of thinking will produce a true answer. Let me give you a practice that works because it mirrors how an actual circuit self-corrects. 30 to 45 seconds is enough if you do it with precision. Sit or stand without forcing posture. Exhale fully. Not a soft sigh, but a deliberate emptying, like you're clearing old static out of the line. Then inhale slowly and imagine the breath moving down the spine instead of just into the chest. Hold for a moment. Not to strain, but to let the charge settle. Then exhale again. But this time, let the body soften as if the current is expanding outward evenly. 3 rounds of this. What you're doing isn't calming down. You're resetting distribution. You're letting the regulator reestablish a stable baseline so the next signal that comes in doesn't distort. And here's the piece most people never connect. When your nervous system is steady, your entire field stops broadcasting mixed data. Suddenly, conversations sync, decisions feel obvious, and timing aligns in ways that feel almost engineered. That isn't magic. It's what happens when a circuit finally stops fighting itself and starts conducting in one direction. But once emotions ignite, everything changes. Because emotion isn't just a feeling, it's raw voltage waiting for assignment. Emotion is the moment the circuit goes from passive to weaponized. People think emotion clouds judgment, but that's only true when the charge has no direction. In reality, emotion is concentrated voltage, the only form of internal power that can reshape a circuit instantly. When you feel anger, grief, desire, or awe, you're not experiencing feelings. You're handling a surge that can either overload the system or amplify it beyond its usual limits. The difference is whether you assign that charge or let it run wild. Most individuals lose power because they treat emotion as something to suppress or escape. But suppression doesn't make the voltage disappear. It traps it inside the loop, forcing it to pulse against the same internal walls until it burns grooves into your behavior. That's why the same patterns keep repeating. The charge is never reallocated. It keeps firing down the only pathways it has left. If the circuit is wired for fear, the voltage empowers fear. If the circuit is wired for self-doubt, the voltage strengthens doubt. But when the circuit is clear and intentional, that same voltage becomes precision fuel. Imagine a moment when you felt sudden fear before speaking publicly. Your hands shook, your breath skipped, your thoughts scattered. That wasn't the fear itself. That was your circuit resisting the massive spike hitting it. But if, instead of bracing or shrinking, you let the voltage travel downward through the body, the charge transforms. Fear becomes alertness. Alertness becomes presence. Presence becomes intensity. The same surge that once made you freeze now makes you unmistakably focused because you've given the current a route instead of letting it crash against blocked pathways. Emotion is the only force in your system strong enough to rewire behavior, break loops, and override old programming without effort. Logic can't do that. Discipline can't do that. Only voltage can. And the moment you claim emotion as fuel, not an enemy, the entire field reads you differently. People feel it before they understand it. They respond as if your signal suddenly carries weight. But there's a darker side to this mechanic, one that most avoid because of how sharply it exposes why they lose power the moment someone else enters the room. The truth is uncomfortable. Your field can be hijacked long before you notice anything is wrong, not because you're weak, but because circuits interact faster than thoughts. Before you interpret a situation, your system has already exchanged microsignals with the environment, signals that can distort your internal current if you're not anchored. This is why you can walk into a room feeling clear, meet one charged person, and suddenly your whole inner rhythm collapses. The hijack happens at the level of electrical resonance, not conversation. When another person carries unresolved voltage, anger, insecurity, dominance, hunger, their charge seeks a pathway to discharge. If your circuit has any open loops, any unsealed pathways, their energy follows those openings and pulls your current off its own trajectory. This is not metaphor. It's how resonance equalizes. Two circuits interacting always move toward the stronger or more stable frequency. If yours isn't stable, you become the receiver of someone else's broadcast. That's why you walk away thinking thoughts that aren't yours, replaying emotions you didn't start with, feeling drained without a physical cause. Reclaiming command isn't about protecting your energy. It's about completing your internal loop before the environment completes it for you. When your circuit is closed, meaning your charge has a defined path and a clear return point, no external voltage can latch onto it. The field senses coherence and stops trying to pull you into alignment with anything else. Picture a simple scenario. You're in a creative flow, ideas sharp, attention steady. Then someone interrupts with a problem soaked in frustration. Without meaning to, you lean in, your body tightens, your breathing changes. In that moment, your circuit opens. Their unresolved charge finds an entry point, and suddenly your mind feels scattered, your inspiration evaporates, and you can't explain why. You think you're being empathetic, but energetically you've allowed your loop to be overridden. To reverse a hijack, you don't push back. You reassert your own signal. Drop your attention down into the lower body, breathe once with weight, and feel the exhale travel fully downward. That single act closes the loop. It tells the field, this circuit has a home frequency. The distortion falls away because it has nowhere else to connect. And once you realize how quickly the environment can rewrite your internal state, the next question rises with a sharp, undeniable edge. If others can shift your signal that easily, what happens when you learn to shift it on purpose? Reprogramming your field isn't mystical. It's engineering. You're altering how the circuit routes charge, how it interprets incoming signals, and how it stabilizes intention without leaking voltage. Most people try to change their lives through willpower, but willpower is just a surface switch. It flips easily under pressure. Reprogramming happens deeper, at the level where breath, focus, and electrical rhythm synchronize. When these three align, the circuit rewrites itself without resistance. The first tactic is what I call breath code sync. It's not normal breathing. It's breathing with a command embedded. Inhale as if pulling a thin line of current straight up the spine, and exhale as if dropping it through the legs into the ground. On the third cycle, add a phrase internally, not a mantra, a directive, something like steady now, or hold the line. The nervous system responds to paired signals, physical rhythm plus semantic intent. You're not calming down. You're programming the regulator to lock into coherence on demand. The second tactic is charge reset. When you feel scattered, it's not mental, it's excess voltage with nowhere to land. Take your right hand and press it lightly against the lower ribs. Then breathe into that area as if inflating it. What you're doing is redirecting floating charge toward a physical anchor point. The moment the charge collects, the mind clears because the circuit stops sparking into open space. The third is focus, redirect. Instead of trying to concentrate, shift your attention 2 inches outside your body, right in front of your chest. That outward placement removes you from the internal loops you're stuck in, and suddenly the field feels spacious again. From there, bring the focus back inside slowly, like drawing a line of current into a socket. This creates a clean entry point for whatever signal you want to amplify next. The fourth tactic is field seal. Imagine the edges of your body as a boundary of warm pressure, not a wall, a membrane. On your exhale, feel that membrane thicken slightly. You're not blocking anything. You're defining the perimeter of your circuit so external charge can't hijack an open pathway. When sealed, the field becomes readable, precise, and self-contained. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt your whole mood shift for no logical reason? Tell me the moment it happened. I want to see how your circuit registered it. Obstacles in your energetic system aren't random. They follow predictable patterns like flaws in a circuit board that only reveal themselves under load. The most common trap is leakage. Not emotional, but electrical. You can feel it when you're doing everything right, yet somehow running out of internal voltage. You start the day clear, but by afternoon the signal weakens and your decisions feel heavier. That's a leak, a place where the current escapes instead of completing its loop. The mind interprets it as doubt or fatigue, but the body reads it as incomplete routing. Another trap is overforce. People push their intention like they're trying to shove energy forward, but circuits don't respond to pressure. They respond to configuration. When you overforce, the current collapses inward, creating a reverse flow. That's why the harder you try to manifest clarity, the foggier everything becomes. You're generating turbulence instead of direction. The cure isn't more effort, it's tension release. When the internal pressure drops, the current resumes its natural path, and what felt impossible becomes obvious. Then there's the split signal, the most subtle yet destructive trap. You want something, you fear the cost. You feel called forward, but an old program pulls you back. The circuit receives two commands simultaneously, and instead of choosing, it stalls. You experience this as procrastination or indecision, but electrically, it's a frequency conflict. A circuit cannot conduct two opposite currents at once. It freezes to prevent burnout. The solution is neither motivation nor logic. It's alignment. You decide which signal is primary and withdraw voltage from the other. The moment one feed loses power, the circuit unsticks. One more trap shows up when people stretch their attention too thin. Every direction you look, you open a micro pathway. Too many open pathways create noise. Noise destabilizes resonance. Suddenly timing is off. Intuition flickers, and everything feels fractionally misaligned. Not enough to cause collapse, but enough to create hesitation. The fix is to narrow the aperture, not through force, but through intention. Bring attention into a single area of the body, feel it fully, and let the rest fade. As the noise drops, the signal strengthens automatically. And once you see how these traps operate, something becomes clear. Your entire life has been shaped by currents you never learned to guide. Currents that have been steering your behavior long before you had language for what they were. That realization forces a deeper question, one that bends everything forward with a sharp pull. What happens when you finally move with the current instead of against it? Integration isn't a theory. It's what happens when the circuit stops behaving like separate parts and starts functioning as a single, coherent line of current. Most people try to apply what they learn, but application is mental. Integration is electrical. It shows up in motion, in the micro choices you make before you even think. You'll know you're integrating when your reactions change without effort, when the body responds to pressure with grounding instead of tension, when your attention shifts like a guided beam instead of a scattered spark. That's the moment the internal and external fields begin to speak the same language. Daily life becomes the perfect test ground. You wake up and the mind wants to rush into tasks, but instead of letting the current spray outward, you pause, feel the breath drop, feel the ribs widen, feel the circuit complete its first loop of the day. That single act sets your baseline frequency. Later, someone tries to pull you into their urgency, but instead of absorbing their voltage, you sense the direction of their surge instantly. You feel it hit your boundary, you feel the field tighten, and then, rather than collapsing, you reroute. A tiny grounding through the legs, one slow exhale, and your signal stays intact. They feel it. The room adjusts around you. Integration also shows up in timing. You stop forcing decisions and start sensing the moment the internal current lines up with external conditions. Suddenly, emails get answered at the right second. Conversations open naturally. Opportunities appear without strain. It's not luck. It's resonance created by a stable circuit in motion. You're no longer leaking charge into worry or hesitation. You're carrying it forward as momentum. Movement becomes cleaner, quieter, more intentional. Even creativity changes. Instead of waiting for inspiration, you feel the buildup of voltage before the idea forms. You sense the swell, you ride it, and action follows effortlessly. This is the body becoming an instrument of its own frequency, not reacting to the world, but shaping it. And as you start living like this, as the circuit holds coherence even under pressure, a realization emerges with a weight that can't be ignored. There's one more shift that rewrites everything you thought you understood about power. Power doesn't expand in a straight line. It expands the moment your circuit becomes influential enough to reshape the fields around you. And once coherence stabilizes inside you, it starts spilling into the domains people usually separate: money, relationships, purpose. But these aren't separate arenas. They're just different materials that respond to the same electrical law. The stronger, clearer circuit sets the rhythm for the environment, not the other way around. Take money. People obsess over strategy, timing, or luck, but money follows charge density. When your circuit is fragmented, every financial move feels risky because the internal current can't sustain momentum. You start something, stall, overthink, retreat. But once the circuit is unified, money stops feeling like a chase and starts behaving like a response. You take an action, and it lands. You follow an instinct, and it connects. Opportunities magnetize because the field can finally read your signal without distortion. Not because you're manifesting, because you're conducting. Relationships shift even more dramatically. Most connection issues come from mismatched circuits, mixed signals, unresolved loops, emotional surges with no grounding. But when your internal wiring is stable, you stop seeking validation because the voltage that once leaked outward now cycles cleanly. You speak with weight. You listen without absorbing someone else's static. People feel safer around you because your field isn't hungry, reactive, or chaotic. And power exists wherever safety and intensity meet. You become someone others naturally orient toward. Purpose also clarifies in a way that feels almost engineered. Instead of searching for meaning, you feel the current pulling you into specific actions. You notice which tasks energize you, which projects increase voltage, which environments sharpen your signal. This is guidance, not mystical, but mechanical. The field reflects the circuit. When the circuit is aligned, your path stops scattering and begins converging. Here's a scenario you've lived without realizing the mechanics behind it. You're in a conversation about a future opportunity, a job, collaboration, investment. Halfway through, your body lights up with a subtle forward pull, like the current wants to move. That pull isn't excitement, it's alignment. The circuit recognizes resonance before the mind does. And the moment you follow that pull instead of doubting it, doors open with unnatural smoothness. People call it intuition. Tesla would call it tuning. Once you taste this level of influence, where your signal reorganizes external reality instead of reacting to it, the next realization hits with quiet force. You're no longer participating in the world the way others do. You're shaping it. Sovereignty begins the moment you stop mistaking other people's signals for your own. Most humans live in a borrowed electrical environment, their moods shaped by whoever stands closest, their direction swayed by the strongest external voltage, their identity stitched together from feedback they never questioned. But when your circuit becomes self-generated instead of reactive, something radical happens. External fields stop having the authority to rewrite you. You stop oscillating. You stop compensating. You stop surrendering your current to the loudest broadcast in the room. You become the source, not the receiver. The unhackable self isn't someone who avoids influence. It's someone whose internal loop is so complete that influence has no entry point. The emotions still arise, the world still applies pressure, but nothing penetrates without your permission. Voltage comes in, but it doesn't reroute your intention or distort your baseline. You process it, redirect it, convert it, and send it back out as a clean signal. That's sovereignty, not detachment, but authorship. Think about how often people are pulled into invisible negotiations. You feel someone's disappointment and your chest tightens. You sense someone's envy, and suddenly your confidence dips. You absorb someone's frustration and your breathing shortens. None of these reactions are conscious choices. They're open pathways being exploited by environmental charge. But when your internal wiring is sealed and coherent, these micro-invasions stop instantly. You still perceive the signal, but it passes through you without altering your rhythm. You read the field without becoming the field. This state changes how you communicate. Words become more precise because they're powered by a stable current. You don't speak to gain approval. You speak to transmit clarity. You don't react defensively. You respond with intention. And people feel it. Not just in what you say, but in what you emanate. Your presence carries structure. Your boundaries become implicit. Chaos avoids you because it can't anchor itself to a closed circuit. Sovereignty also rewrites your relationship with time. When you're no longer pulled by external charge, your actions line up with internal timing instead of social urgency. You move when the current is right, not when anxiety tries to rush you. Decisions come cleaner. Risks feel calculable instead of overwhelming. You sense when to expand and when to hold because the circuit reports truth without distortion. And once you reach this level of electrical authorship, the world stops feeling like something you navigate. It becomes something you direct. Everything I've told you leads to a single image. One Tesla understood instinctively. A human being as a living circuit standing inside a vast, responsive field. Not a metaphor, but a functional reality. Your thoughts are surface sparks. Your emotions are voltage surges. Your nervous system is the regulator. And what people call God's spirit is the current running through everything, waiting for a stable pathway to express itself through. When your wiring is fragmented, the current hits you in flashes. Coincidence, intuition, rare moments of clarity that vanish before you can act. But when your circuit becomes coherent, the current moves through you continuously, reorganizing the world around you as if reality itself has started taking instructions from your internal configuration. That's not fantasy. That's engineering at the deepest level, shaping resonance by shaping the conductor. Picture this. You stand in a dark room, silent, still. Around you is a grid of currents, invisible, but humming. You inhale and feel the spine light up with a thin line of charge. You exhale and feel the field respond, like the air thickens with awareness. Then the circuit closes, clean, uninterrupted, undeniable. In that moment, you're not asking the universe for direction. You are direction. You're not waiting for signs. You are emitting the pattern the world now rearranges itself around. If you've ever felt your mood change the instant you stepped into a certain place or near a specific person, you already know the field is real. Tell me the moment you felt it most clearly. I want to hear how your circuit read it.